In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplin Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplain's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
So Chaplin's Report today, we're continuing in our study on Ruth. And I really have enjoyed this study because I do think that the book of Ruth just has so much to say about how humans interact with one another, especially in the context of romantic relationships. So just to set the table a little bit for you, this is the point to where Ruth and Boaz have already met. They already seem to have a general admiration for one another. They both tend to like one another, and they sort of see the good in each other. And because of this, Ruth decides she'd kind of like to take it to the next step, and Naomi kind of advises her in this. So Naomi gives her some advice on what she needs to do and how to take care of Boaz while he's threshing, because what's going on now is Boaz has a lot of fields, he has a lot of barley that he's harvesting right now. And just so you know, when the harvest takes place, and this would have been harvest time, when the harvest takes place, what they'll do is they'll take the raw grain into a barn or a facility of some kind, and they'll thresh the wheat and sort of grind it out to where only the barley, only the edible part is left. And so they're in some kind of barn-like building when they're doing this, and they work sometimes well into the night trying to get everything done and try to get everything ready to sell it or to store it or whatever else they need just to go ahead and get the wheat ready. And so it would not be uncommon at all for a lot of the workers, in fact all of the workers, to be present and basically be working round the clock to try to get this done not long after the harvest. And that seems to be kind of what's going on here. So we'll go ahead and go to Ruth 3:6-8. And remember, this is the context in which this is all happening. So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law had commanded her. When Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came secretly, and uncovered his feet, and lay down. What happened in the middle of the night, that the man was startled and bent forward, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. Now, Ruth is doing this to take care of Boaz. He's very tired. He's already had his meal for the night and drank a little bit, and because of that he's getting tired, and so he goes over next to a pile of grain and sort of just takes a nap. Now some people might accidentally interpret that to mean something that was going on, that he just got drunk and sort of passed out at the end of a pile of grain. It doesn't seem to be that that's what's going on. Now he may be a little bit intoxicated. I can't speak to whether or not he was or not. It says that his heart was made merry. I don't think that that necessarily means that he was like falling down drunk or anything, just that he was starting to feel the effects of it. But nonetheless, because of the very labor-intense nature of the work of threshing, like I said, they're working basically round the clock to try to get all this stuff done, which is very unusual in their time considering they didn't have, electric lights and that kind of thing. So Boaz just goes over and sleeps by this pile of grain instead of heading all the way back to his home. I think that says a lot about Boaz. Boaz is a very wealthy man. That's the way the scripture describes him. And yet, here is Boaz, not in his house, not relaxing while other people and servants are doing the work. He's out there working with them. That's who Boaz is. The man is a provider. He's industrious. He didn't get wealthy by accident. He didn't get wealthy by being lazy. This is this guy named Boaz, who is actively working to make sure that everything is right in the harvest. He's not leaving the work to other people. He's not isolating them or anything. This is a guy that is concerned about it, and he is willing to put his own hand to the stone, and he is willing to do the work himself. That's the kind of man Boaz is. And I think this is part of the reason that Ruth is probably attracted to him. So he's just a sort of a blue-collar working-class guy, even though he's very wealthy. And let's take a look. We've looked at Boaz. Let's take a look at Ruth. Why is Ruth doing this? Why is she taking off his shoes, uncovering his feet, making sure he's comfortable, taking care of him when he's gone to go to sleep in this pile of grain, and then staying at his feet. What this says to Boaz, and this is the reason that Naomi advised her to do this, is that I can take care of you. I care about you. I care about your comfort. I care about what happens to you, and I'm going to stay here with you through the night to make sure that you're taken care of. Now, Ruth is doing this at the bidding of Naomi, but she also is willing to do it. She seems to be a very compassionate person. Because here's a wonderful trait in women and men serving one another. And that's not necessarily gender specific, but we serve each other in different ways. And this goes back to this idea of complementarianism, which is really, really important in all relationships. Because men, by our very nature, we need to feel like protectors and providers. And any man that doesn't care about whether or not he's a protector or a provider is probably not a man you want to get involved with. So as men, we need to feel as though we're guarding things. We need to feel as though people are being taken care of and feel safe and feel like they're adequately fed and clothed and all of these things. We need to feel like we're meeting needs. We need to feel like we are bringing home the bacon, as it were. Which apparently is offensive now, according to PETA, but we're just going to skate right by that. And then you have Ruth, who's a woman who understands that men need to feel that way. They need to feel respected, and because of that, she and a lot of other women take it upon themselves to try to make sure that their man is well taken care of, that he can recharge a little bit in order to get back out there and be the provider and work hard and all those things. And so that's an important role that Ruth wants to be able to play in his life. And so because of that, and Ruth is not a stranger to work either. Keep in mind, just the last chapter, we saw her being involved in the harvest as well. And so Ruth is not someone that's afraid of work, but she understands that Boaz, he needs a little comfort. He needs a little bit to recharge and sort of set himself back up to go out and work and be productive again. And so because of this, the male and female relationship, they're really kind of modeling how men and women should react to one another. And so because of that, because they care about each other and because they love each other, they are willing to do this for one another. Because men need to feel like protectors and providers, but women need to feel as though they're comforting, they need to feel as though they're needed, and they need to be able to nurture and care for somebody and their well-being in that way. It's just something that God put in them, which is a really good trait that he has. And they do both take care of each other, but in different ways that are best suited to them. So let's take one other look at another verse just a little bit later in Ruth 3, verses 9 through 11. He said, this is Boaz, he said, "Who are you?" And she answered, "I am Ruth, your maid. So you spread your covering over your maid, for you are a close relative." Then he said, "May you be blessed in the Lord, my daughter. You have shown your last kindness to be better than the first, by not going after young men, whether poor or rich. Now, my daughter, do not fear. I will go for whatever you ask, for all my people in the city know that you are a woman of excellence." So this is really what makes the relationship between Ruth and Boaz so great. They do want to be together, but they want to be together for the right reasons. Because they admire each other, they see virtue in one another. Boaz is looking at Ruth and sees somebody that's willing to take care of her mother-in-law, who she's not even a blood relative of, and willing to become a Jew and follow God and all of these things. And Ruth is looking at Boaz saying, this is a guy who is willing to protect me. He cares for my well-being. He cares about poor people. He wants to help those that are weaker than him. And he wants to be able to provide not just for me, but for other people as well. And so they love each other, and they do so for the right reasons. I think sometimes in our society now, we way overcomplicate courtship. We way overcomplicate the male-female relationship. And I don't know if that's all because of romantic comedies or all these other things, but I do know that if you're looking at romantic relationships in the Bible, they're usually pretty simple. And I think that if you're looking back at relationships, at least in my experience, of people that have had successful marriages, their relationships are usually pretty simple. Not perfect. Doesn't mean they never have a disagreement. Doesn't mean that they don't ever get upset with one another or have problems. But they're based off of a really simple concept, which is We've made a commitment to one another. We're going to stay together, and we're going to do so because we love and respect one another. That's really all it boils down to. That doesn't make it easy, but it does make it simple. And I think that's part of the reason that Ruth and Boaz work together, because sometimes when it comes to relationships, we set our expectations way too high. And that doesn't mean that you expect nothing out of your partner. You obviously want to hold them to certain standards and hold them accountable, and that's part of the good thing that comes from being in a relationship. But we tend to think of that everything's going to be all rainbows and butterflies the entire time that we're with them, and I don't know how many times I've heard the phrase, well, they make me happy. Well, happiness fades, and they're not going to make you happy forever. So you better figure out something a little deeper than that to be able to hold you together, because if they make me happy is all that you've got, you're going to be unhappy at some point later in your life. And the question is, can your relationship stand up to that? Because if it's built on just, well, I'm happy when I'm with them, ergo I want to be with them and marry them. Sorry, that's not going to cut it. Because eventually one or the other or both of you are not going to be happy. And as sad as it is to say, that is going to happen, and you've got to figure out whether or not your relationship can withstand that. So if I had any advice to take away from this, just love other people the way that Ruth and Boaz love one another. That's the best advice I can give. When you're seeking a mate, do so because you're doing it for the right reasons, you respect them, and you want to be with them because they make you a better person. Because they encourage you and they try to work with you in such a way that you can do more than you could do when you were by yourself. That's the reason that you should be seeking a mate. Because in the end, they help you in your walk with God. Stay the course, friends.